Welcome back on the Leaders Who Care, and may I wish 2024 to be a year of great advances and prosperity, despite the headwinds that we're facing around the world. I think that's why we need more leaders who care to make a difference, to bring certainty in these uncertain times and hope. And that's one of our mission on the Leaders Who Care, to give stage to those who go beyond the profits and margins and really want to impact the world. And today, I have the privilege to welcome a great leader and a guest of biodiversity, passionate builder of more sustainable and greener worlds. I have the privilege to be joined by Oliver Dart. Oliver, thank you for joining us. You are the founder and CEO of Wildya. Would love to hear about this, but I'm really excited and privileged to have you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. Awesome to be with you. Really looking forward to our chat today.
Well, likewise, Oliver. We prior to joining and establishing, well, dear, you were in many different industries and also opportunities from travel, tech, mobility, e-commerce, non-profit. Would love to hear a little bit about you and what what sets your heart on fire to do the things you do. How did you arrive where you are? Maybe a little bit of story and background
Yeah,
of your
yeah.
journey.
No, lovely to share that. In a nutshell, for both people that can't listen to my voice for now, 1 minute to rumble about my life. It's nature. Like everything that I do is about nature. It's about especially wildlife. That's what really keeps me going. I love plants too. I love fungi. I'm really interested in it too. But like, let's be honest, it's really like wildlife. That's really what my heart is like kind of beating for. And so that's like, since I can remember, that is actually the case. Maybe I'm one of the rare ones, but since a really young age, I just was fascinated by the wild world. And so I knew a lot of like animal names like platypus or wildebeest or elephant seal before I could say other words. And so that kind of passion that just like grew in me. And then, as a lot of people in their teenage times, you start to hide yourself a bit because you realize, ooh, actually not everybody is like a big fan of animals, or animals are not cool. You need to care about, like clothes or about like other possessions. And so I lost myself a bit in my teenage years, got a bit not distracted, but was just not showing myself, I think, as much as I, looking back now, would say would have been maybe healthier for me. And then after high school, however, I went to Australia for 1 year, and there I had like the time and the privilege to really think about like what I want with my life. And I realized, okay, why should I live a life for other people? If I really care about nature, then let's dedicate my life towards it. And then there was just a question, okay, but how can I dedicate my life to nature? I realized by growing up that nature is unfortunately getting destroyed very fast, and so I was like, okay, I really need to be focused on how can I help nature the best. And for me, that was like studying business, because I realized businesses, at least in the current times when I was deciding that, and even today, I would say, are mostly more, unfortunately, destroying nature. And so I wanted to understand, how does a system work? How can we maybe change the system? How can we change it from within? What are the strategies that they're using maybe to sell their products? How can we maybe use the same strategies to actually get more people excited about nature? And then really fast forward, because I don't want to like bumble up too much about this. Basically, it took me through the different industries that you just shared. It took me through the different countries that I was living in. And yeah, and then COVID came, and as with many people, I realized, okay, I set out to do something. I didn't, maybe I failed, but I said basically I was not dedicating my entire career towards biodiversity and nature. And so I said, like, okay, that needs to change. And then basically 3 years ago, I set out to create something as wild as Wildya, yeah, where we try to combine mental health with nature. So
Tell us more about Waldia. I'd love to hear about that hybrid model. How do
yeah,
you get the best of nature in the wild and to help the world?
yeah, that was basically the concept of that came with a reflection again, that I was trying to understand, okay, how can we how can we move the needle the most? Because in the end, as leaders, we always need to think about priorities, and we need to think about like, okay, the energy that we put in, where can we change the world for better, with our time that we have on our hands? And so I decided that I think it's we got very disconnected from nature because we're living so much in cities. And I thought like, hey, it would be great to reconnect people with nature. But as soon as we talk about reconnection to nature, often it's put into this kind of spiritual box. And I thought like, no, I think there's ways how we can help people, reconnecting them with nature. And so I thought like, hey, why not kind of help people with something? And if we really truly help people, usually they're fine in paying something. And then we can take that money and then we can actually protect and restore nature, because unfortunately, not enough people care right now about nature. It's not really on the top of priority list. Yes, we appreciate it, but we don't appreciate it enough to really make our lifestyle changes. So I was like, okay, we need to find something that people really strongly care about, and that is themselves, and that is their own well-being. And so I thought like, hey, let's try to help people with their mental well-being, because that is something that a lot of people still don't know so much about, and where I think when we talk about leadership, I think it always starts with us. Like if we are mentally not fit, it's very very challenging to lead others, because you need to start with
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, you can't give something you don't have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah.
I understand that you give 15% of the revenue, or even the
Yeah.
profits, to protect and restore nature. That's really honorable in many ways, and that's part of your business model. Do you see that this could work, this combination with business and sustainable business and making a positive impact? Do you see that is something which could be replicated or used by other organizations?
Yes, I mean that's definitely what I hope for. Like right now, we are still in the startup stage, so you know how it is. Like you need to test, you need to validate, you need to find product market fit. So I think, to be honest, in a startup, it's always our role as startups to challenge the status quo. And so I thought, like, if I start a new company and I just follow what corporates are doing, how can I be really like a challenger? So I thought, like, okay, let's try to find like a number that is on one side reflecting what the market is paying for other things. So, for example, if we take a look at apps, because with Wildya we create an app that really helps people. And so a lot of people don't know, but as soon as you actually pay for an app, 30% of that just goes to Google or to Apple. So it doesn't end up at the company that provides you the app, but it actually ends up there. So we are paying Apple or Google 30%. And so I said like, okay, if we pay those and the market just accept that, then I think we should also pay nature, because nature, at least at Waldja, it provides us with all the kind of inspiration. It is our muse. It is like the reason why we are doing all of this. So I said like, now we can't just do 1%, which is like really famous, 1% for the planet. I said like, no, we need to be bolder, and 15% I think is a realistic amount that is financially doable. It is necessary, and we have to test it. We need to see. And I think it is definitely possible, to answer your question. I think it's definitely possible to duplicate that, to copy that into different industries and into different companies. I want to basically show with Wilder that it's possible. And as soon as you have proof that it's possible, then it's hopefully also sparking like the ideas and pushes into other fields. Yeah.
I really love that and appreciate it. You've previously spoken about having your own crisis a few years ago, which led to you to discover and unpack the concept of eco anxiety.
Mhm.
Tell us more about this and how we can self-identify experiencing eco anxiety. What are the real triggers there?
Yeah. Yeah, so for a lot of like, quite often the terms eco anxiety and climate anxiety are used for the same, but it's a bit different. Whereas with climate anxiety, you're mostly really afraid about, let's say, your future, the future of your family, well being, and it's mostly really triggered due to climate events. that are happening. So there's massive droughts, there's floodings, and so on. So climate anxiety is a lot triggered by really the climate, as it says. Eco anxiety takes the climate, but also kind of nature degradation and all of that into consideration. So personally, for me, a lot of my eco anxiety were always coming more from the, let's say, biodiversity spectrum, because yeah, as I said in the intro, that is where my heart is really like rooting for. So my eco anxiety was basically triggered by seeing that we are just like destroying this place like really really fast, and that I had the feeling like I was not doing enough, and that a lot of other people were not doing enough. And basically what I did is I put like all this pressure on my shoulder that the biodiversity crisis needs to be fixed by me. I know that sounds like super silly. I'm I'm pretty sure this is like something that other leaders have in common as well, is that we don't have to fix it all by ourselves. But back then, because I didn't have other role models or I didn't have other people that were caring about this topic, I thought I really have to do this on my own. And so I just got really into dark places. And I, back then, that was like kind of 5 6 years ago, I didn't know that eco anxiety exists. I didn't know about the term, so it was also very challenging to Google how I can maybe help myself and how I can maybe find resources. So basically my entire journey then afterwards was like, how can I help people so that they get as soon as possible to understand that this actually exists, that you're not alone in this? How can I help them to get out of this kind of paralysis mode? And how can we maybe then use those feelings to catalyze it? So how can we use this kind of anxiety, that anger, that fear? Is there something that we can do with it? Because we feel it. So either it's kind of can just like take full control over us, or we can maybe take those emotions. As much as we use passion and as much as we use love, is there maybe also something how we can catalyze those feelings into actions to actually do something about this? Because it blocked me for far too long. So I wish I now can help just people to get there faster. Yeah.
As a leader, you're facing your own organizational environmental impacts, maybe quite overwhelming. So, what are the small steps that really can leaders take, to make it more enjoyable, more manageable? Because on one end, you're dealing on this major topic, but also building a business, being a leader. Everybody wants more from you, so it's a very demanding role.
Mhm.
What is what is your advice to future leaders that are starting out or in the scale up phase?
It's a very very good point. I think there's like two things that I would recommend there. Is I think one, I mean, that's what also got me into this field. I think trying to grow yourself as a person, learning about mental health, mental well-being, neuroscience, psychology, like a lot of the things that we often in the business world labeled as like soft skills. I think learn those just because you will understand yourself better and you will understand other people better, and it will just make everything like easier. A lot of people, for example, have like really troubles with asking for help, me included. And some other people, for example, they struggle to be honest, like how they feel, or that they're all overwhelmed. And I think like as soon as we learn more about this kind of mental health, mental fitness aspects, I think you will just have a much easier time to just be open with your team when there are these kind of situations where you are overwhelmed, where you need a helping hand. And that will just help you massively because you don't have to do everything by yourself. That's like really important. And I try to live by this, but I have also my days where I'm like, I'm preaching about those things and then I don't do them myself. So I, just because you're listening to this, I'm not perfect either. I think that's like number one. And number two is something that I got definitely better, but I think it breaks a lot of ideas and it breaks a lot of like mental health. I think, and it breaks a lot of teams and a lot of projects, is actually focus. That there's a lack of focus in this world. There's tons of problems, and there's even more solutions to these kind of problems. But our time is very limited, and your time as a leader is very limited, and the skills or the resources that you have, they are probably limited to a certain extent as well. So focus, focus, focus is like a key thing that just helps you to stay a bit more in control. because we get so overwhelmed if we are not really focused, because we are saying like, oh, we need to tackle this, and we need to fix this issue, and we need to tackle that area. But no, what are the areas that, let's say, you are caring the most about? What are the solutions that maybe you have at hand right now? What are the resources that are available to you? And then really try to focus on what can move the needle the most. That will really get you far, because otherwise you will just pick up things and not finish them, or you will not really get far. And if you don't make the progress, it's again going to be hard for your mental health. So focus, I think, is something that I was lacking for a long time, and since I got better in this, I definitely see some progress.
That's very wise, I would say. Whatever you focus, it grows. So, but it's not always easy to focus on the good things or on the things that really want to happen versus on the problems. How do you handle that? How do you really make that? Because there is, let's say, a burning platform or problem at the back, and then you know that how you solve this problem is by focusing on business growth or your team or the purpose that you were there in the first place. So, but you know that's on the back of your mind. How do you handle those priorities?
Yeah, that's a very good one. Especially, I think, as long as you are like, let's say, in a startup, and if you don't have, let's say, a massive team, that is indeed like I think one of the biggest challenge. And there's not like a really easy answer to this. What I always try is I have a technique where I try in my head, whenever there are certain tasks that I need to do, is I have an impact axis and I have a time investment axis. And so I quickly try to go through them. Okay, if there's, for example, burning thing and it really creates some damage for the company, then I just need to fix it. It just doesn't matter what I want to do in the future, whatever. For example, if there would be an hacking attack, or if there would be something that nobody can download our app, or major crises like this, then for me it's always about like really taking care of what do the people outside see, because internally, sometimes there might be problems as well, but it's very, very important that, especially at the outside, the users, that you don't lose the trust, because it's very, very hard to build up a good reputation, but very easy to destroy it. So everything that the outside can see, for me, that often has really priority. If there's a major issue there, then definitely let's fix it. When it now comes to opportunities, trying to be a realist. So on one side, I try to allocate my weeks and my days into things like, okay, what operationally needs to be done, so that it's just you need to keep the ball rolling. But at the same time, I'm working always. I try to dedicate myself like time blocks, so that I'm really working towards the future as well, because we otherwise end up in just doing weekly operations, which is also great. But if you never kind of step back and ask yourself, are we going in the right direction? Our hypothesis actually really true? How can we maybe have exponential impact on the business other than what we're currently doing? I try to dedicate like at least 30, 40, 50%. I try to balance it. In some weeks it works better, in some weeks it doesn't. Last week, for example, we launched an eco anxiety quiz, because we wanted to help people to experience and learn more about eco anxiety in a more gamified way, so that they can open up to that topic. But to be honest with you, like, I was like 1 week just doing operations because work needed to be doing. So yeah.
Hmm.
And there's other weeks where I can apply for, let's say, grants, or where I can try to look for investors, or where I can think about like, okay, are we still going in the right direction?
No, thank you for sharing. That's really important. And when it comes down to really our own feelings, especially in the world of obviously eco anxiety or people really being uncertain about the future of the planet, there is also a lot of negative results and feelings that people have being too late to make a difference to the
Yeah.
world. What is your take on this? How do you deal with that?
That's a heavy one. That's a heavy one, Marion. I have my stance on that is like, if we give up, like if we basically say it's too late, what's the future alternative, what's the scenario that would then basically play out if we say it's too late and we just keep on doing what we're currently doing? We know that the climate will worsen. We know that biodiversity crisis will actually cause like really major problems for us people. So a lot of the one of the problems with climate and biodiversity is still often that I think we are struggling a bit to break it down to people. Like, it's not just that we're doing this to have nicer weather, or that it's not like, oh, cool, we're going to have elephants in the future. It's also a lot about us. So if we don't manage these kind of crises, they will actually affect a lot of, and we're talking about millions to billions people. And so if we don't do anything, then this will happen for sure. Whereas if we still have a lot of things in our control. COVID was an amazing like proof that if we come together, like, a lot of horrible things happen, don't get me wrong, but it also showed that when we come together and we see something that is, let's say, threatens people, and that threatens individual people, but also like entire communities, entire societies, that we can actually do something about this. And climate and biodiversity, let's be honest, it's really threatens us. And so we have seen that within 1 or 2 years, we can actually make a lot of progress if we are very focused, if we put resources, if we collaborate together. And so it showed us also that we can turn things around. And so I'm like always like, I get that feeling. It is I have bad days as well where I think like, ooh, we're in big trouble. But let's try to, pull up our sleeves and get to work, because let's be honest, we have a lot of research, we have done a lot of talking, we have a lot of goals that we set, a lot of targets that we set, but we haven't done like so much work on it.
Mm.
So now we need to do a bit like the dirty bits of really getting our hands dirty and do the work. And if we are working all together, if we're working our ass off, and then it's still going to be an uninhabitable planet. Okay, but at least we can all say to each other, "Hey, we tried our best. We did like everything that we knew that science was telling us, and it was still not enough." I think everybody could live with that, really live with that in brackets, but I think that's not the stage that we're currently at.
That's very, yeah, indeed. You still, there's always a probability that if you don't do anything, you clearly the outcome is going to be very negative. But at least you have a chance that better things could come, and we've seen it, as you say, when we come together. I think one of the greatest thing that I've seen in people, and we all make that choice, is that sincere love for the planet,
Hmm.
for the people, for
Mm.
each other. Personally, for me, obviously from a spiritual point of view, I thank God for everything that happened to me, and being here really. So the question is, what can I do for this planet? How can I be a giver than a consumer as such? We
Mm.
all consume, but if we can give more, that will be a good balance to have on your scorecard, and really
Mm.
focus. And as you said, there's a lot of solutions out there, but somebody needs to do the work. And
Yeah.
yeah, you had a very interesting experience that uh, you were in the tourism industry, right, during the
Yes.
COVID time.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Uh, Tell us about your experience of being a leader of a team in the tourism industry during COVID. That's
Yeah.
kind of a quite a thing. How do you manage these times of crisis while making sure you take care of yourself? What was your experience and takeaway from that moment?
Yeah, that's a again like a great question. I was like a leader already a bit in some of the companies before I came into the tourism industry. But the interesting bit was I actually became a leader at the ITB. The ITB is the biggest tourism conference in the world, and that event got cancelled because of COVID. And at that event, so in that week, I was actually promoted to become a leader in the team. And so basically my entire leadership experience in the tourism industry was purely crisis management, was purely being some sort of a semi psychologist trying to make things work. Because let's be honest, when you're in crisis management, it is a really, especially such an extreme crisis like the was with COVID. It is not the business as usual. It's not like you're creating like reports every week, and yeah, it was like it was a very very intense. But I also took like a lot of learnings away from that, because what you just said, did I manage to take care of myself? I don't think so, to be honest. I think I was a lot in really firefight mode. I realized that after I quit my job, before I quit my job, I actually went to South Africa, and there I had like some a bit like gap time to let this entire 2 years basically of crisis management, and reflect a bit on that. And I realized that I didn't take really good care of myself, because I was so in the mode of like, how can I help others? I was working for a company that basically connected travelers with local agencies around the world. And so we had basically always a triangle. We had the company that obviously had this interest. We had the customers, so the travelers, and we had the travel agencies. And our job in my team was basically to satisfy all three. And so we had to deal with that as a team. And then as a leader, obviously, I had to try to satisfy or to keep my team sane. So I had the four kind of group of people that I needed to take care of. And to be honest, I think a lot of energy actually went into doing that, and especially the team, because the team, I always have the feeling, if you take care of the team, then the mission that you're on with your company or the challenges, you will be okay. As soon as you try to focus on trying to micromanagement and do everything yourself, I think that's where things often go really wrong. If you really spend a lot of time, I think, on the team, taking care of the team, listening to them, trying to identify roadblocks, trying to, especially in a crisis situation, just be human. I think if you do that, then the rest will be much more manageable. And I definitely saw that in this crisis, that we luckily did that, and it was very very tough, but we somehow, yeah, we somehow made it work. But I think like one of the, let's say, if I try to bring it into a nutshell, trying to take care of yourself, being human is not a weakness but is a strength. These two were kind of my major takeaway. So yeah, taking care of myself, I did manage that well, but I think I managed to take well. I think I lived up really this human part. I think I really tried to live that part, and so I was always transparent with the team, though, that I had my challenges as well to navigate us through this.
Well, you're still in the midst of your strength, very young. Really, I
Yeah.
would say that the current but also the future leaders for years to come. What can we do today? How can we spread the care culture and the hopes for the future generations? If you were in a position of much bigger influence, or let's say there was almost no limits to what you can do, what is one thing that you think will be the most impactful to live in a more caring or more better world?
Ooh, there's like, there's really like a lot. Let's start with some easy things that we definitely tend to forget. One is like listening. We grew this kind of culture of everybody wants to talk but nobody's listening, and so why do we keep on talking if nobody's listening? So I think like listening is quite important, and super basic skill that we however forgot. So really listen. Don't try to think about your next sentence. Try to listen to what the person really says, not what you think the person is going to say or what you think the person means. I think listening goes actually really long way. If you try to listen and just asking questions, if you really understood what the person was saying, I think that would actually get us a long way, because it removes this kind of like, sometimes we are very much in our head, and I think that removes that bit. So like
Hmm.
this can really make sure that we understand the person, and if we understand the person better, then we can also adapt our speech and like how we try to help them, or what kind of mission we want them to embark on, we can tailor our speech to them like much better in a much better and caring way. So I think like listening is definitely one that is very often overlooked. The other one is like we often use the term in the leadership like lead by example, but I think it's one that we take leading by example for some aspects in leadership, but we don't take it for others. So I try to make this a bit more clear. I can't expect my team to be vulnerable and tell me what is going on if I don't do it myself, or I can't ask my team to kind of take their mental health seriously and don't be 24/7 available for work if I'm 24/7 available for work. So by example doesn't mean just like picking the things that you want to lead by, but also the bits that are a bit like tricky and like kind of not removing the mask and actually say like there were like points like especially in COVID crisis time, like there were points where I literally cried like 2 or 3 times, where I cried in front of the team because I couldn't do it anymore and it was like too much. And that's, for me in that moment, it was like it was not a plan or anything, but I think these kind of things are important, that we can be vulnerable too, that we can have bad days too, that we are just like human as anybody else. We're not like supernatural. We try to do better and we try to help others to do better and we try to lead the way, but doesn't make us less human. And I think leading by example, but not just like the bits that you always read in these kind of inspiration posters or books, but also leading by the hard bits that you might be not super comfortable with. I think it's important because otherwise it's quite hard for your team to do the same with you. So, and I'm always a big fan of like, if I don't know about the problem, then I can't help you and I can't help to fix it. So
That's
so I think that's where it comes into. Yeah.
You mentioned books. What are the top three books you would recommend anyone to perhaps read, books that have made an impact on you personally?
We Right. I would try to just pick the first one that come to my mind. One that really influenced me a lot to become, let's say, to dedicate my life to something that is bigger than me was, there's a book called The Five Top Regrets of the Dying People. It's basically a woman that helps elderly people in their last weeks of their life. And basically, she accumulated like what were the five top reasons that most people said. And they gave me a lot of perspective on life and on what life should be really about and where I think I should spend my time on. And I think if you want to become a great leader, you also need a bit of clarity, like what your great life looks like and what you want to bit like to accomplish and to learn from maybe the mistakes of others. So that book, I would definitely put that really on the top. The other one is You Are Not Listening. So I just talked about listening. So I think it's a good book. Like sometimes people don't know where to start when we say something like, yeah, just try to be a better listener. Okay, but how do I do that? You Are Not Listening is done by a researcher, and she basically really makes the case in a quite a good case of like, yeah, how we lost the art of listening and why it's important, how you can do better. And she gives you really like a lot of tricks and tips to this. And then maybe one of the last books that I read that is a bit more leadership relevant is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And what I liked about that one was that as leaders, we often also can get wrapped up in the short-term perspectives of like, there's like competition, or we need to hit the monthly goals, or we have KPIs that we have here, or we have the OKRs. What I liked about his perspective is that one of the major goals that we want to stay in the game. We want to keep on playing the game. And now if I take that for biodiversity loss, for example, is biodiversity loss, as much as I hope that we could fix it in 1 year, that's not going to happen. It's not going to be a sprint. So you need to create a system for like the company or like the NGO that you're leading, and also for yourself. You need to build yourself up to not pretend that this is a sprint that will be over in like 2 weeks, but to make decisions that ensure that you have long term keep on playing the game and that you will have a impact of a longer period of time, and that you don't just think about like, okay, how can we make cash really quickly and we're gonna burn, and then I don't know, maybe you create something really great but the company closes after like 4 years. So that's not, I think that's like where a lot of tech startup went in the last decade, and I think that is not really healthy, and he makes like a really good case about that, how it's good for companies but also good for your own mental well-being.
Oliver, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you today, and really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for the insights and really great advice that you have shared with your own experience. May I wish you a lot of success. May the 2024 be a exceptionally fruitful year. And God bless you and your team and your family. Thank you for being with us and being a leader who cares.
Thank you so much for your time, Marion. Thank you so much for the listeners. I hope that was a bit useful for some, and yeah, would love to be back in the future.